listeners to the BizBlend podcast, where business meets real, raw talk and strategy meets soul. I'm your host, Sana, as always, and today we are diving into something, a topic many leaders, founders, CEOs, they will avoid until it is too late. Well, we are going to talk about CEO disease and founder syndrome. Now, let me ask you this. What happens when the leader becomes the bottleneck? When the vision that once sparked a movement begins to limit growth? And listeners, joining me is Nico Van de Venne. Let me share a bit about Nico with all of you. So, he's an award winning leadership coach known for helping high achieving CEOs and founders navigate the hidden layers of success. He's got a talent for surfacing the conversations that don't happen in boardrooms, but they desperately need to. And this episode is not just about leadership, listeners. It's more about inner leadership. It's about blind spots, burnout, and also breaking the myth of infallible founders. So let's quickly dive in. So, Nico, welcome to the show, and I'm really, really excited for our conversation today.
Thank you for having me, Sana.
Ah, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, Nico, let's understand about both the terms. You work with powerful leaders who often struggle in silence. So, for all of us, if we can help us understand what exactly is CEO disease and why is it so pervasive, especially among high achievers?
Yeah, indeed. Well, let me ask you another question, if I may. Um, how do you look at leaders in that position, in executive or founder? How do many of us look at them? It's a rhetorical question. Most of us look at them as being those powerful
Got it.
foundations or statues that run the company. They're the boss, and et cetera, et cetera. But we simply forget that they're also human beings. And it's always so fun to see movies or yeah, these episodes of certain shows where a
Yeah.
CEO is this power person with the tie, white shirt, walks around fully confident. But if we know who they really are, you might be astonished. You have to remember that everybody's been that 8-year-old little boy or girl who was thinking of becoming a prince or a princess or a police officer or fireman or whatever it might have been at that point in life. And life kind of takes care of some things where you grow up and you come into a point where you become the leader. And that could be CEO or a founder. It's depends, of course, on how life gives you things or how you achieve things. And that's where
Mhm.
it kind of comes in that a lot of people who come into that position, they've kind of flown into it or
Mhm.
ended up into it. Um, it sounds like it sounds like it's kind of luck, but it's not. It's something that they were striving for, and it's also influenced by the image or the perception that we as a community, as everyone has of those positions, as if we are in control and we are the master of the game. It's like in chess, there's one person who's actually making the moves that will win
Mhm.
the game. But on the other side, there's somebody thinking deeper and knows I'll abide my time and step in when it's necessary and win the game from there. So it's kind of unknown what goes on in those minds. What I found at some point is I talked to a lot of leaders in very high level companies. Um, I don't touch the Fortune 500 stories because that's a completely different story. But I do talk to a lot of leaders who've made $1 million companies, so 7 figures, even 8 figures, and so on. But what comes down to, and it's every time it's the same kind of thing, they are still that little boy and girl who wants to be recognized at some points. And how that manifests itself is sometimes within the symptoms that I call or I bring up from these two terms, so CEO disease or founder syndrome. And when we look at CEO disease, for instance, it usually, and you can apply this to founder syndrome as well, but most of the people that feel isolated are in a C level. Why is that? One of the biggest reasons is that they have more bosses than any other person in a company does. We always see these guys as or girls as being, the top of the game. They're the leader. They should, they plan the strategy. They do all these wonderful things, but they have to report to the board of directors. They have to report to other stakeholders. They have to, the shareholders and so on and so on. So they have a lot more bosses than we have. We usually have just one person, which makes it easier. What comes out of that is isolation. Feel alone. They don't have
Yeah.
anybody to talk to. It's one thing.
Absolutely.
I don't wanna go too deep in all the symptoms because there's a lot of them.
No, 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 no. I absolutely appreciate the fact that you are um, putting out this humanizing perspective, this humanizing side of the leaders, the CEOs out there, because it is absolutely right. Um, it could be a systemic issue or a systemic way of thinking, but they are putting out the fires every day, every moment, and it's kind of that robotic that uh, maybe it's a heavy word, but facade that they're putting onto them. So it is, and sometimes it becomes inevitable. And I absolutely agree with you on this.
Yeah, indeed. It's like, you can compare it to a cancer, for instance. A cancer is not always detected right away. It kinda simmers in the body, and at some point, you go for a checkup and something's wrong, or you feel that there's something is wrong in your body, and you go for a checkup, and then they find out that you have the big K. These 2 symptoms or these 2 diseases, I call them diseases because they are so, they live under the surface, and then that's what the disease usually does. When it's most effective in being infectious is when
Mhm.
it's not there yet, when you don't see it yet. And when it becomes a problem is when these symptoms come up. For instance, for founder syndrome, when a founder becomes adverse to changing or resisting to scale their company. If you have a founder that has a beautiful middle management of say 20 managers and about 400 or 500 people that work for them, and they're at a they kind of hit a ceiling where
Mhm.
either they let go of the company and become an investor, and you
Mhm.
put in a C level. Kinda That's kind of the logical step these days to do that, or a COO, just an operational, person. The step to go there, it's their little baby, they founded it, they build it, from scratch or with a partner or whatever, but letting go of something that you've built and you've done yourself, even though it's been years, is difficult for a lot of people. And it also depends on how you stepped into becoming a founder. If you stepped into creating a company out of pure passion or out of pure frustration because you didn't see a solution out there that could help people, and you start building that company up, you have two ways. Either you grow naturally and it's kind of evolution, or you stay small and you say, okay, I don't want to grow. I want to be focused on specific issues and stay small. That's everything's fine, we don't have to grow. We don't have to do all these amazing things. But if your mindset is, I want to have the most impact in the world, then you also take into account that you might need to expand to other countries and so on. For a lot
Mhm.
of founders, the step going from I am a company and I need to go to the next step is it's a very big leap. It's not even, and they are used to spending money, investing, and so on. But taking that step, that's a whole different story, and it's an internal war. Nobody will notice this. That's the horrific part of it. It's like they keep this to themselves because if they talk to somebody about it, they might need to take those steps. They might need to go to a specific company that might find somebody to take that position and so on. And they might need to let go of those little things that they've loved doing all this time. They might not even been good at it, but it's still something that they love doing. So there's a lot of different levels in that. And what usually happens is they come to a breaking point where they see a lot of people leaving the company, for instance. That's sometimes an effect that subliminally or subconsciously people start notice that there's something wrong with their leader. And it's not always literally that they see it in writing or in the attitude. They realize that the company is stalling. And that's where the leader should realize I need to do something about it. Now, how I approach these things is I don't well, I don't act as a confidant, but I am a confidant, which means that all conversations that come into my office are kept in my office. I don't have people writing, what do you call it? Reviews or anything like that, because all the information needs to be 100% confidential. I have a, my business is based on trust. So if I use anybody's name within marketing or whatever, it's not okay. My role is to be completely silent and listen to the stories and make them realize that something's going on. That and let them flow into the decision of, oh, hold on, I'm actually the bottleneck. It's like you mentioned in the intro, the question is very, very prevalent and very important to ask yourself in whatever position that you are with your company. If you're a starter, just think about, where do I want to go? You'll never know, by the way. It's always something that flows and changes all the time. But doing this regularly helps you, touch base with your inner self to see if there's any conflict going on, because that's where it starts. And then, of course, you can find necessary persons to help you with that.
You are like the wise old man.
Thank you for the compliment.
Nobody knows, but you are back of the curtain. You are silently watching everything, observing everything, listening, and you're also guiding. So that's a tough job. That's a tough job,
Yes.
Nick.
Yeah. Bit frustrating sometimes, but I've learned to appreciate even that. The thing is, you have your Albert Einsteins of the world, Napoleon Hills, and so on, all these figures that have become a household name within personal development or in science or in business or whatever. Andrew Carnegie is the steel king or emperor of the world at some point, and so on. All these names were thrown out there. And at some point in the past, I was thinking like, oh, I want to be like these people. I want to leave a legacy and this and that. And I started realizing, let me give you a little bit of history on my part. Um,
Yeah.
at one point, I actually I went in a very deep, full blown depression, and the cause of that depression was twofold. I had become impervious to feelings. I was being lost in a relationship. That was one part, and on the other hand, my career was running too smooth. It was going so well. I got all the opportunities I wanted, and success was just, it was a given. It was not something to strive for. I just had success. Um, to a point where I was asking myself, is this really all there is? That was the prevalent question at that time, is like, is this all there is? Am I just going to do this the whole time that I am working? I'm going to just, jump from one leadership position to another, enjoying my time doing it, but what am I doing it for? And it has become so important to me to understand that there is no destination. The voyage is the destination. Each and every day you get up in the morning, your voyage of that day starts, and you don't even know what's going to happen that day, because you can plan your day from 1 minute to the last minute that you go back to bed, or that you decide to stop working or whatever. Um, but there will be continuous change in your schedule. That's the natural effect. That's chaos theory. And what I've learned is, from my past, so I was really deep and I got out of it by using meditation and understanding mindfulness. breathing techniques, and so on. At some point, people were thinking, "Whoa, he's going the woohoo style. He's going to the clouds. He's going to be, walking around on slippers, shorts, and I don't know, Hawaiian t-shirt or something like that." But for me, it was like revelation to understand that us as a human being, the word being is the most important thing.
Mm.
One moment, and a lot of leaders, they are being lived. They are not being. So they become a tool within an organization, and they kind of lose their own identity, their own why. Why are they getting up in the morning? Because a lot of people ask them to, but is that the good reason? And it's all these kind of things that kind of came together to a point where I said, you know what? I don't care about being a household name. I want to help those people that are in the same position that I was and bring them to a point where they can just get up in the morning and say, today's going to be a good day and I'm going to enjoy every part of it, even the bad parts, even the painful parts, because it's part of life anyway. And that's kind of how my history came to this point where I said, there are so many people out there, and I was looking for a couple of terminologies that might hit, the right spot with a lot of people who don't realize, because this is something that nobody really always realizes that they're in this position. And I came to the point where I said, let's search. Of course, in the age of AI, you kind of jump into one of those prompting things and you say, I'm looking for this and this and this. And then suddenly there is a person in the US who created these terminologies. And I said, it sounds really, really close to what I'm looking for. It's
Mm.
long term, you don't see it, comes up, its symptoms come up, and then you start rolling and deciding, wow, I'm not doing well.
Hmm. And first of all, Nico, you have been there, done that, and that's exactly why you could present the human side for all the CEOs and founders. I just want to understand one thing. Why do you think? Why have you associated the CEO with disease and founder with syndrome? What exactly is the correlation in there? I mean, CEO disease, is it because it can happen with any CEO, or it is not preventable, it is preventable, or it can be only cured? And then about founder syndrome, that these kind could be the signs and symptoms, but you can actually prevent it. I mean, what how exactly it all got conceptualized?
It's an excellent question. Uh,
Yeah.
to me, it was at some point a decision of who are we going to talk to,
Yeah.
and where am I going to be able to make the most impact? And it's I started a long time ago with individual coaching, with you know family and friends and people I knew and so on. Kind of grew from there. Um, And within my leadership roles in the past, I've done a lot of things in the past. And within my leadership roles, I kind of noticed that employees are not the kind of people that I want to influence. Not that they're bad or anything like that. Not at all. It had something to do with wanting to have an impact on a bigger scale with that one individual. So I started looking at this story and said, who's the guy or the girl who has the most impact on the most people with their example and their attitude. And I came to the point, well, it's entrepreneurs. So entrepreneurs, who are they? Well, they're founders and they're CEOs, because it kind of evolves one from the other and the other from the one. Let's go for that group of people. And then when it came down to finding a real name, that's where I started my search of, these are the symptoms. What can I call this? And at some point, I even got a name for the medicines, or so-called medicine, which would be my program. But I don't do that anymore. I used to have a full blown program, with every date and moment that we would talk and this and that. And I've also learned that people at that level, they are not worried about the finances. They just, when it becomes important to them, the investment is always worth it. What
Mhm.
they worry about is the amount of time that they need to take, because the only resource that we cannot recycle is time in our life. You know, if I spend 5 days sitting on a log somewhere and not getting anything out of it, it's 5 days that I effectively have lost in my life. You always lose
Mhm.
something, but it's kind of looking at the contrast. So I just started thinking, okay, what do they need? They need a phone number or a Zoom link or whatever that they can use within X amount of time. And that's what I've been doing. I've been telling them, I'm here. You need me? That's the price. That's the amount of time that you get from me. Call me, send me a message. We'll talk. I will listen. I will go from there. They don't need all these long-term and expansive 9-month tracks or programs or anything like that. No, they need somebody who listens and who acts on that and gives them feedback, and especially clear and honest feedback. I've had a CEO in a conversation at some point. He was nagging. He was really throwing it out there. Everything was wrong. It was everybody else's fault, and
Mhm.
this and that. And I at some point I actually I had a little mirror close by all the time because I knew next time he's gonna call, it's gonna happen again. And I picked up the mirror and I put it in front of my camera. And he said, "Something's wrong with the image. There's only your camera is only visible. What's going on?" I said, "If you would have been sitting here in my office, you would have gotten a mirror in your face." And he said, "Well, why?" And I started clearly telling him, look at yourself first. You're the one who's causing the problems. It's never somebody else. If you have a problem in your life, it is you who needs to start with fixing it, not the rest of the world. If you have an issue going on and it's part of you, you're the one, and so on and so on. So I had to be really bluntly honest with him. And he adored me for it. He said, a couple of weeks later, sent me an email, said, "Nick, what you've done, it's just, opened up my eyes, and I now realize that I'm the one who needs to take action," and so on and so on and so on. And that's also one thing. So the time thing, they don't like to spend too much time on things. It has to be efficient and very brutally honest. That's the second thing.
Absolutely. Sometimes the truth can be really, really uncomfortable, unsettling, um, and it can hurt you. But it is for our own good, and I absolutely agree with that. Um, Before even pointing out fingers, and I think this is not only relevant for someone in the leadership position, but for every one of us. I mean, yes, everyone will have their fair shares of trials and tribulations, trauma, good or bad. But uh, to be reactive to people or circumstances or events and just blame everything on everyone or every thing else, that definitely is representative of a that's what we call victim mindset.
Yeah.
um,
It-
so that's quite a great example, a good example, Nico. So well, I wish we could go on and on because this is such an interesting outlook on especially the leadership discussions. But Nico, if our listeners, they would like to get in touch with you, especially the founders, the CEOs who are listening to this conversation, they would like to connect with you and explore more about how they can be aware about the signs and symptoms, how they can prevent this or how they can cure it with your help, what will be the best way?
Well, there's two paths that you can walk on. One path is just go to my website, which my full name, just in one word, NicoVandeVenne.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Those are the two best paths to find me. I also have a podcast that I publish every week. That focuses on these two subjects, which is run with leaders who've had experience with these symptoms or these diseases, or it's just a sticker, a name on something, but and you see very clearly that it is something that's out there and it's not talked enough about. So go there and have a listen.
Mm. Absolutely. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes for our listeners. And Nico, what an incredibly grounding and eye-opening conversation. Um, to all the founders or CEO listening today, I would love to say that Nico helps us recognize any of these patterns in ourselves or maybe our team. And let's pause, reflect, and let's be aware that we are not alone. So, Nico, thank you once again so much. This was absolutely refreshing and lovely.
Happy to be here.
To all the listeners, just refer to the show notes to connect with Nico. Along with this episode, and don't forget to subscribe to BizBlend, share this episode, and also leave us a review. Until next time, keep blending ambition with awareness. This is Sana signing off from BizBlend. Thank you.